Hello, croissant all. Welcome back. I'm in the back garden having a cup of tea and some birthday cake because it's really sunny and it was my birthday the other day, so go get some cake. Join me. You can only watch this video if you're eating cake. And the medieval cult of saints might seem like a really weird, obscure, got icing on my arm, subject to do a video on, but it's actually where an awful lot of places in Wales get their name from. And this week I've been creeping around the Isle of Anglesey for my PhD thesis fieldwork, and most of the places that I've been going to look at gravestones for my thesis are named after saints. In fact, almost everywhere in Wales that you go, there will be somewhere called llan something. And llan means parish. So a llan originally was often a church that had been set up by somebody. So if you went to, say, Llan Eilian, that is Eilian's parish. Llan Gredifail is Gredifail's parish, and so on. Now, the medieval cult of saints became really big in the late Roman Empire. So when Rome adopts Christianity as its state religion, ooh, that's a big chunk of icing, all of a sudden, all of these people who've been executed, these Christians who've been fed to the lions, suddenly are being venerated as martyrs. So they have been sort of secretly remembered by these Christians that they left behind. But now that Christianity is legalized, you can openly venerate them. So these people stop just being ancestors, old friends who died for the cause, when people start praying to them. And that's the key. This is where you go from just being a normal human being who died for a really good cause and is getting your reward in heaven, to being somebody who is sanctified, somebody who is holy. And all over Europe, this idea starts exploding. This idea, not just Europe, all over the Roman world, this idea starts exploding of these martyrs, these people who've given their lives for Christianity, are up in heaven, and God has rewarded them not just by being in heaven, but giving them powers. And they have the power to hear your prayers, they have the power of intercession, they can intercede, they can be involved in your life. And the idea develops that not only does their spirit have this power, but their bones have power. So the mortal remains of these people start being worshipped as relics, holy items. So any part of a saint's body, the teeth, the bones, the hair, even things that have touched them, so clothes, start to become things you can worship as a Christian. Cults start developing up around these relics, and it becomes traditional that to set up a new cathedral, or you have to have the bones of a saint there. You have to have a relic to set up a cathedral. So they become really, really important things to have. And in the later medieval period, there's a black market for relics. There are thousands of fake relics and fake bones of saints and all sorts of things. There's about 36 Christ's foreskins in the medieval period at one point, I think. Absolutely crazy. And the rules get really complex. So the rule stops being, if it's somebody's bones, a holy man's bones, or a holy woman's bones, it's a relic. It then becomes, oh, if you accept that this has the holy power of a relic, it's a relic. So it doesn't matter if it's real. All that matters is the belief in this relic. It could be a chicken bone that somebody sold you as a finger bone of St. Ambrosius, but if it's something that you believe in, it's totally cool. It just gets blah. I mean, you've probably heard some cool saints' relic stories. If you know of any fun stories related to medieval relics and like the black market around them, please share them in the comments, because there's some great ones out there. But the cult of saints really takes hold in Britain and Ireland, in sort of the island of Great Britain and the island of Ireland. You get this huge uptake in the cult of saints in sort of the 6th century. And part of that is to do with the Celtic Church. So you've got the Roman Catholic Church, and then when the Romans leave Britain, it's basically left to its own devices. I mean, literally, see to your own defences is what the emperor says when the Romans leave Britain. And they do. And that includes their religion. So you've got all these brand new Christians who suddenly don't have a direct link to Rome, the Pope, the bishops, any of that stuff. I've got the cake burps. And they start developing their own sort of rituals and their own ideas of what is holy, what makes a saint, how the church works. You get cool stuff like bishops getting married and then handing the diocese onto their son. The Bishop of Bangor, which is where I am now, handed the cathedral and the diocese to his son for generations. Not really the done thing in the Catholic Church, in the Roman Catholic Church, but in the Celtic Catholic Church, things were slightly different. It wasn't like an entirely different religion. That was an idea for a while, but it's like a slight variation that just needed to be brought back into the fold a little bit later on. So in this Celtic Christian sphere, there's a lot of monasteries, there's a lot of monasticism and hermits and pilgrimage. Pilgrimage is a really big part of Celtic Christianity. And to have pilgrimage, you have to have lots of holy sites. And a lot of the bigger saints go to places like Jerusalem and Rome, and they do go on pilgrimage to faraway places. But a lot of the ordinary folk of the British Isles needed closer places to go to. And the best way to have somewhere close by to go on pilgrimage is to have a local saint. So a lot of the places that are saints' llans in Wales are named after just some dude who set up the church. So you have places like the Priory of St. Seiriol on Anglesey, which is a 13th century priory built on the site of an earlier monastery, on the site of a holy well and monastic cell. So St. Seiriol was a 6th century prince who became a hermit, became a monk, which was really popular in the Celtic Church, being a hermit, being a hermetic monk. Not hermetic, being a hermit was very popular in the Celtic Church. And he went over to Anglesey, Ynys Môn, and he set up a cell. His brothers came to visit, 2 kings came to visit, decided his cell was pathetic, and set up a full-on monastery there, which Seiriol probably hated, because eventually he moved onto a tiny island and just lived his life amongst the puffins on Puffin Island. But over the years, this became a huge pilgrimage site, and this holy well is now there, which was probably just where he drank and bathed, and he probably baptised local people in the well, and as far as we can tell, he didn't really do all that much that would make him a saint in the eyes of, say, the Pope. But he is still considered a saint in Wales. He is a saint, he is celebrated as a saint. And another one of these is St. Cybi. Cybi was another prince. He was Prince of Cornwall, became a priest, eventually became a bishop, and when he came back to Cornwall, he found out his dad had died. He didn't want to be king of Cornwall, so he turned the throne down, and instead he went on missionaries. And he went over to Ireland, and he established churches there. He came over to Wales, and the king of Gwynedd, a man called Maelgwn, gives him an old Roman fort. It's actually a fortlet. It's not a full-on legionary fort. It's quite small. It's only like 120 square feet, 120 feet by 120 feet, something like that. Not square feet. You guys can do maths. Tell me how big it is. And there's quite a lot of the Roman fort left, actually. It's this 4th century Roman fort, so it's a late Roman fort, with cool herringbone stonework and a nice double gatehouse that you can still see, and you can just walk around it. It's like completely free. It's just in Holyhead. But the Welsh name for Holyhead is Caer Gybi, which means Cybi's fort. Because Cybi was given this fort in the 6th century, 200 years after it was built, and he uses it to set up a monastery. And it actually becomes like a centre of learning and a centre of education in theology in North Wales. It's quite an important site for a few hundred years. In the 10th century, it's actually attacked by Vikings and destroyed. But his bones are supposedly buried in the fort, in another church. So there's the big 13th century church that is there, and it has cool stonework. It has like medieval faces and mythical beasts carved on top of it. And then there's this little church called Eglwys y Bedd. And Eglwys in Welsh means church, like Eglise, Ecclesia. And Bedd, B-E-D-D, B-E-Th, is grave, so the Church of the Grave. And that's meant to be where St. Cybi's bones are buried. And it is a real medieval church. It's 14th century. All that's left now is this tiny little section of the nave. But again, he is worshipped as a saint. He has a saint's day. I think it's the 1st of February in the Catholic and the Orthodox churches. But both these saints, Seiriol and Cybi, are what they call pre-congregational saints. Hi, Editing Jimmy here. So I managed to completely forget to include in the recording the whole reason why I chose Saint Cybi and Saint Seiriol. There's a story on Anglesey that Saint Seiriol and Saint Cybi were busy mates. So every now and then, Saint Seiriol and Saint Cybi would go and meet up together in the middle of Anglesey, in Llaner Chymedd. And Saint Seiriol would set off with the rising sun behind him, and Saint Cybi would set off with the rising sun in front of him. And they would have a lovely old time, and they'd have a cup of tea and a chat, and discuss theology, I guess, probably. And then Saint Cybi would go home with the setting sun in front of him, and Saint Seiriol would go home with the setting sun behind him. So they called them Cybi Melyn, which means tawny Cybi. Melyn means yellow in Welsh. And Seiriol Wyn, which means white Seiriol. Because Cybi got a lovely suntan and had to put on his extra SPF, and Saint Seiriol never did, because he probably had long straggly hair. Well, he probably had a Celtic tonsure, actually, but... Anyway, bye! So they were worshipped as saints, they had cult followings. Prior to being officially recognised, or without being officially recognised, by the congregation of the Roman Catholic Church that decides if you're a saint or not. I'm sure Editing Jimmy will put it on the screen for me. But there are loads of these saints in Wales, all over Wales, like Illtyd and Eilian and Dwynwen and Gretifail. They're all over the place. Even the patron saint of Bangor Cathedral, St Seiriol, he's another one. There's a Saint Denwall in Brittany, same guy. Established churches in Brittany, in Wales, down in Cornwall. I think the only two Welsh saints that are actually officially recognised by the Catholic Church are Dewi Sant, patron saint of Wales, and Winifred. But there are dozens of saints all over Wales, because this cult of saints just exploded here. It was really, really popular. And there's a similar situation in Ireland and in Scotland, and even Anglo-Saxon England was quite big on saints. People like Cuthbert were very, very big. But this is effectively an entire video that's a phrase of the week. Because if you go to Wales, you can now read a load of place names. Llan somewhere means parish of somewhere. So Llan St Iestyn's parish. Llan Eilian on Anglesey, Eilian's parish. Llan Sadwrn, St Sadwrn's parish. Sadwrn is the Welsh word for Saturday. Dydd Sadwrn, Saturn's day, just like in Latin. So Saint Saturn, which is probably Saint Saturninus or Saturnius. The Welsh cult of saints, the early medieval cult of saints, it's not just about collecting dead people's bones, but it is in part about collecting dead people's bones. It's also a really interesting aspect of Celtic Catholic Christianity. And I think it's important to remember, Celtic Christianity isn't a completely separate kind of Christianity. They were still Catholic, they were just slightly different. And that's not surprising when they had, a couple of 100 years without direct contact with Rome? I mean, they had some missionaries coming over, but they mostly did their own thing. I mean, they even had a different tonsure to the Roman tonsure, where you cut your hair in a circle. We don't really know what the Celtic tonsure looked like. We have theories. One theory is that you shave the entire back of your head and just have a tuft on the front, but I have yet to make a solid conclusion. Oh, that sun's got out. That sun's very fierce. I'm going to turn my settings down. That's a bit better, isn't it? I'm not quite as washed out. The sun's just completely burned through all the clouds up there, so I've got no chance of having any nice subtle lighting. But thank you all so much for joining. If you guys have been on the Patreon recently, you'll know that we now have a Discord server, so feel free to join the Discord if you're on the Patreon. It's open to all the tiers of that, all the levels, and we've already got some cool chats going on. It's a place for you to share ideas, share any sources that you have, ask questions, and obviously share any of the cool reenactment projects that you guys are making, which you're already sharing with me in messages, so thank you ever so much for that. I turn up there every couple of days and sort of hang out a bit on the Discord. My friend Alex did most of the work behind that, so thank you, Alex, for doing that. He's doing an amazing project to recreate the Carmarthen grave, which is a fantastic site in Germany. So check him out on Facebook. I'll link to that in the description of the video. It's well worth a look. What he's doing is fantastic. He's using some great creators and craftspeople to put together an exemplary living history interpretation. So, thank you very much for joining me. Diolch yn fawr iawn unwaith eto am ymuno. It's gone dark again now, honestly. It's a beautiful day. I'm just basking like an iguana in the sun. Oh. But diolch yn fawr iawn unwaith eto am ymuno fi. Thank you so much once again for joining me. And till the next time, hwyl am y tro. Ooh, I'm going to get suntan. Cake and a suntan. I'm genuinely just eating cake. Oh, I love cake. So good. Oh. I love birthdays.